Yeah, well, anyway, I wanted to ask you, um, I know that you have a keen sense of pitch. You grew up with perfect pitch. So did Milton, right? I mean,
Sure,
it's.
sure. And I think Milton and I talked about that. We were the same. Like, neither of us ever heard a pitch that didn't have a name on it.
Right. Yeah, so strikes me when you talk about how you manipulate pitches and want to recolor them and regroup them in significant ways, that is this to some degree a compensatory strategy for having perfect pitch?
Well, now look, the thing that I do claim is that I never heard an interval in my life
Right.
because that's just not what I mean. G flat and B flat, a major third. Yeah, sure, but it's those two notes, bango, G flat and B flat, and they make a major third. And now I fancy that in doing the kind of thing I'm doing, I'm giving a break by leaving gaps and whatnot. I'm giving a break to people who have to hear just intervals and not name pitches.
Interesting.
But that's what I tell myself. And I know Paul Lansky has on occasion caught me listening to just a piece in the classical repertoire and making remarks to which he said, Jim, that remark could only be made by somebody with perfect pitch. Says, if you don't have perfect pitch, you wouldn't. And, how do I know? I couldn't tell you.
It would be fun to be able to switch. I always
Switch
thought pitch
heads,
should be
yeah.
something that could be conferred upon you like a degree. That, you grow up hearing intervals or whatever, but at some point, or that you could turn it on and off.
Well, look, I'll tell you, that's maybe not such good news. Because as I get older, my inflexible sense of what pitches was what, from listening to records made at all kinds of, it's gone. I frequently wobble a half step's worth as to what key that's in. And just to show you that I don't hear intervals, something that I'm following in B flat major, let's say it finally becomes maybe something I realize, I know this piece, and I know it's in A major, and so, and I'm in A major. I don't hear any jerk from B flat to A that I've been hearing. I mean, I can just tolerate that much. I remember when I was a kid, let's say 10 years old, they took me to one of my relatives that had a 10-year-old out-of-tune piano that was down a half step. And I tried to play the Chopin C-sharp minor waltz, hearing C minor come out from under my... I couldn't do it.
Disorienting.
I couldn't continue. I mean, just couldn't happen.
Your hands and your ear would be completely off.
Whereas now, I'm pretty sure I could go ahead and make my ear fake it because I've heard
You have a lifetime
records.
of fluctuation.
Yeah.
Speaking of old pianos or pianos that have a certain sound, such words. I mean, the first thing I noticed about it, and I heard it in 1989, was, wow, he must have done this in his basement.
You got it.
Which was a little bit of I think it was the first time I ever heard on a CD.
And basement, upright Steinway, at least, okay?
Yeah.
But on a crappy old dictaphone.
Well, okay, that was the other thing.
Dictaphone.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is not that I had this brilliant idea that 40 years hence, this would have a kind of old-fashioned, tinny, that will come very much into fashion and be an important, no. As I went, in order to test the piece, especially the rhythm of it, to make sure that my long notes were the right length and all of that, and that the stuff I wanted to go at this speed should really go at that speed, checking all that. The only way I could do it was to record for myself what I had done that day and then listen to it, play it back. And I would work on that and get it to my satisfaction. I mean, I remember sweating greatly. I mean, how pissed, something I wanted to mention, the kind of shape that pieces take on for you. Yeah, here we are. I remember right here, this string of rests. I was counting it out probably in eighth notes or something. And I remember concluding that 39 eighth notes of rest was not quite enough. 41, no, that's draggy, that's a little long. 40, that's it. Well, God knows what, I mean, that's a big problem, that I'm doing something like that with my head. And I think that's really important. One problem I will have is that even as long as I remember what that was, when we get to that place, I'm going to start, okay, I'm like this now. Now, is this the right length? Well, what's that supposed to mean? But yeah, it's as if I had a perfect count or something.
So the dictaphone, I mean, so the music department couldn't set you up with a...
Hey, this was sort of before I was technology conscious. And yeah, people weren't all, on heavy technology.
By the end of the composition, you were used to that dictaphone sound, and that was the piece for you.
Hey, I was playing it so beautifully. I mean, take a listen to that.
Oh, I know.
What we did, hey, there we are. In order to make sure I had the right count, I was recording this with a metronome clicking. Clicking probably in eighth notes.
Right.
Nevertheless, with that going, I was managing to do that beautifully shaped performance. Yeah. And, well, I was determined to preserve that. So I went over to Hagen's studio. He did two things. He spliced all the things together so we had one continuous thing. And he filtered out the click, 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 click. Yeah. That's why the tone quality that you've got left sounds like somebody in a deep cave that happens to have no resonance. It's just in a deep cave. Yeah. And it's one of the weirdest sounds you can ever encounter. But yeah, I wanted that performance. I'm always like that. Hey, I got a lot of mileage in my troubadour tunes. I had played that around on different pianos and had the recordings of each time. And what I put together in the end was I selected from all. I selected the one that I liked the best of each piece. And some of the recordings, some of the pianos were just atrocious. And so I would sit there and edit them. Like if something just had absolutely the wrong loudness contour because notes were jumping out. I sat there with the volume like that so that you can hear the background level as the music is going by. You can hear that, Right. Going all over doesn't bother me. It gets those notes right.
Yeah. Is this related to your attachment to MIDI? The idea of getting...
You bet.
Yeah. Getting it right.
That was what got me into computer in the first place. Mm-hmm. That, I just wanted to hear my rhythms done right. And that was, again, back in an era, I've talked about this enough, back in an era when great performances of difficult contemporary music were not to be had.
Yeah.
Whereas now you got groups all over the place that can, so to speak, do that.
And players like Martin and Goldray.
Yeah, I mean, just,
A number of your pieces.
yeah.
Has anyone ever played such words?
Yes. Now I'm trying to think.
Oh wait, there was that concert with Martin, right? He played both of these.
I don't think, no, Martin never played this.
What concert am I thinking of?
Oh yeah, Ben Fowler,
Okay.
the Australian New Zealand
Yeah.
fellow. Yeah, and what he played of mine was Gap 6.
Okay, 6. Okay.
Yeah.
These two pieces for me are so strongly associated with each other that I misremembered. And I thought maybe this
there's
piece
well,
was
yeah.
on that.
Now he did play my chart. My chart shines high. He played that one, but no, he played Gap 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, how about something completely different?
All right.
You said something interesting about Beethoven.
No,
Yeah, well,
I didn't. I didn't mean it.
This is a guy that I've written about here and there, and I wouldn't have even put this in print. Beethoven is a supreme touchstone for all things, period.
Hey, yes, yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think I would have, in my stuff on the heroic style and everything, it would have been hard for me to get those words past the gates of my teeth.
Right, and
There they are.
now, yeah, and like, I spent some effort getting to those gates. And look, one thing that I particularly have in mind there is the idea that, hey, the way pieces of music go, that we've got access to from all centuries, the way pieces of music go, is a hell of an anthology of just important human thought, feeling, activity, or whatever. And I'm sort of right saying there, if it ain't in Beethoven, it ain't. Or at the very least, if it can be done, Beethoven did it.
Right.
Or if it's one of those things that Beethoven really did, nobody else can do it anyway, just Beethoven. And so I'd have to, again, that's a good illustration of a line of mine which is perfectly easy to imagine as sort of almost uninterpretable, if not ridiculous, if you just want to put it into any old context that's talking about Beethoven. You want to try me a little more.
Yeah, you know what?
What's around it?
I cheated a bit because I took a clause out of it. Now that I look at it, let me get into it.
Yeah.
Back in the old days, Mike DeLyra, who's back in touch, once claimed that us Princeton folks were like religious fanatics in our reverent preoccupation with German classics. He figured that Beethoven, observing us obsessing over his scores, would think we were crazy. I was very struck with the remark at the time and could see its justice. I still am, and do, except that now I look at Beethoven as a supreme touchstone, not just for all things musical, but for all things, period.
That's good. That's good. Hey, it's interesting. I mean, certainly, as I do words, that's the way I go. I mean, it has the sound of something that might be, I don't know, it might be doctrine. Not really. No, it doesn't really have a sound of doctrine. It has some other sound, and by the time you get to that punchline, it floats. And you don't worry about it. Is it true? I got another place where I say something about something in Bruckner, which it doesn't need such a feeble articulant as truth.
Yes.
And that's the way I feel. That stuff doesn't require such a feeble articulant as truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, which is great because truth is rarely characterized as a feeble articulate.
No, it is no, but I like
usually
that.
the
Yeah.
Ding an sich that everyone is reaching.
Oh
for.
yeah. Well, I'm pleased with that.
Talk about Brandeis. Their motto is "Truth unto its innermost parts."
Well,
And of course, Harvard.
what?
Veritas.
No, just truth. Yeah, right.
In Latin.
Because we're
right?
Harvard. Yeah, but in Latin.
Truth's not good enough. It's got to be veritas.
Right. And let's see. With me, that whole thing crops up twice in Roses, right? I take it from somewhere. Yeah, from sonata form. I say that something like the Waldstein Sonata. Yeah, all right, it's in sonata form, but the way I follow it, that hardly enters in. I said, and what I'm following has no need of such a feeble articulant as sonata form. And then we get to Bruckner and something he's doing, and I say, who needs such a feeble articulant as truth? So that the two are put very similar, and they make, right away, it's important, I think, just to see how it could mean something, because the sonata form thing is a perfectly good example. Sonata form, yes, that's true of the Waldstein Sonata, and is such a feeble articulant of what the shape of it is.
It's a piano piece. That's true.
Oh yeah, right, right. And to tell you the truth, that may cut more ice than to say it's in sonata form. But yeah, that's where I'm at there. And feeble articulant, and then to have it turn out that truth is a feeble articulant. That relates a lot to me and my Mennonite lady here. The way she was talking about her religion got me very much into the frame of mind where her religion is something that she is inventing all the way, and like especially I guess people that are in it, let's say for the ritual. I'm always tempted to say this. They're inventing it as they go. That ritual clearly doesn't truly mean what they're no. It's that in their invention, this is what it's doing for them. They're putting it together. And in that sense, I think of music as being the same way. And that in the case of religion, I'm thinking truth would be a feeble articulant. Who the hell cares?
That's right.
How does truth apply? And similarly with music, the truth. I mean, one doesn't listen to a powerful Beethoven or Bach piece, which is, oh man, you know, that's an ultimate in human experience, and you don't say it's true. You might, right? But yeah, with religious stuff, the big argument is it true? And that's pretty obscure, that idea. Yeah, and I sort of like the idea that now I don't believe I've sold this anywhere, but I like the idea of looking at the kind of stuff I do with music as exegesis. I always used to think of it as like analysis or description or something like that. But what I'm talking about is my interaction with it. And that's what an exegete does with a Bible story.
Yes.
You know, you start right off with, Isaac or whoever it was, took his son up, and now you go on this. I know these kinds of techniques from Dr. Fred Newlander, who murdered his wife in Cherry Hill, the rabbi. Oh, you don't know from
Is
him?
this a recent thing?
It's probably already 5 or 10 years old.
Okay. Yeah.
The murder, that rabbi who hired his wife murdered. Fred
yeah.
Newlander gave the greatest speech of the 20th century at his sentencing.
Oh, wow.
Oh, man. Oh. And yeah, what biblical exegesis. Jesus walked down the street. Now notice, he walked down the street. He could have ridden a camel and he walked down the street, not up the street. And in this gentle voice, and as he began, he started his speech. This was the crew that was about to decide whether he got the death penalty or life. And so, he gets it, he sits down up there, and he says to the jury, "Good morning." Well, that didn't, they're a little, you fucking murderer. And so once again he says, "Good morning." And he got no response. And then he starts with this marvelous biblical exegesis. It's just like that, with, now I'm aware that each of you feels that I am guilty. You feel obliged to feel that I am guilty. And, he goes on like that. You feel obliged to feel I'm guilty. Even more sinister, that's not the word he uses. Anyway, a magnificent speech. I used to put it in the class of something, and I can't think what. Hey, you're still running over there.
Of course I am.
Oh, as I'm talking this bullshit. There's
a movie called Living with the Friedlanders. It's a
Oh,
Living
yes.
with the
Oh.
Friedlanders or
Yes,
Meeting
the
the
sexual
Friedlanders.
abuse family.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a
Different
different.
Friedlander.
This is
That
Newlander.
My guy is Newlander.
Newlander.
Yeah. Oh, that Friedlander movie. Boy, doesn't that curl your hair?
Yes, it was
I
so
mean-
much does.
Well, yeah.
We live in a hair curling world.
Well, boy, among other things, let's speak of that case. What they're accusing this guy of sounds to me so much like all those cases that they finally threw out after people had served 5 years in jail and that kind of, like one, I heard Bill Kunstler talk about one in which he defended it up here. The little kids said that their instructors turned into rabbits and took them down to the cellar and performed sex acts on them. Well, you turn them into rabbits, okay? Unfortunately, there is no cellar. The lady was convicted. A jury convicted her. Kunstler finally got her off, but she did much time in jail. And hey, like this guy and his son, essentially, as I understand it, the accusation was that he'd take a room full of 40 teenage male piano students, or whatever they were, and get them down on all fours with their butts in the air as they went around cornholing them. Well, now, I'm sorry, I don't believe that anything even close to that ever happened. But that's what they were convicted of. I mean, can you imagine, what are these, teenage boys are putting up with that? 40 of them at once? Like, come on, give me a break. Okay. Oh, let me start with construction of cycles. There's something that is fundamental to most of my compositions that some people seem more secure with than others. Let me just lay it out. I think I can do it clearly and quickly. But this is something that for me is sort of at the ultimate background of the pitches that I'm going to do with whatever I'm going to do. I think of the pitches as things which are members of, which generate 4 distinct cycles. They can generate a complete cycle of the 12 going by half steps. Okay, like everybody knows that. Equally obvious, you can go the other direction and generate the complete set of 12. You also can think of that, if you want, as going the same direction, but up a major seventh. Let's say if you're imagining the half steps as going up. Either way, you've got those 2 cycles generate 12. Now, equally, you can go by perfect fifths, let's say, C, G, D, A, E, etc. And you will generate, if you're thinking like on the piano keyboard, you will generate all 12 notes going that way. Similarly, you could go in the other direction, or you could go by perfect fourths, C, F, B flat, E flat, and get all 12. That's all in the way of intervals that will generate all 12 of your notes. You've got those 4 cycles of minor seconds, major seventh, or perfect fifth, perfect fourth. Furthermore, as you can imagine, since they are completely analogous in that they generate all 12 with 1 interval, there are all kinds of structural properties of groups of pitches that you can read very nicely on those 4 cycles. So that, for example, you can see an analogy between a chromatic segment, C, D flat, D, E flat, and a perfect fifth segment, C, G, D, A. And especially now, if you do one other thing, if you remember that in any case we're talking about pitch classes, that is all C's, all E flats, etc. If you remember that, you can imagine that C, G, D, A, going up all that distance, we can compress that into C, D, G, A, or you get it even more compressed if you take it as G, A, C, D. Okay? If I have occasion to refer to that, I call that normal form. But in short, you can see an analogy between C, D flat, D, E flat, and G, A, C, D, which is not obvious. Like if you know that, that's fine. Then you know that. But if you hear tune fragments of the chromatic segment and tune fragments of the perfect fifth segment, they're quite refreshingly distinct from each other, and yet they're going to have the same properties and will proceed across the other cycles and to transpositions of any and all of them with similar structural effect. So to me, the way notes sit on all 4 cycles is really something basic. I keep notebooks full of stuff about that, and I always dip into that. And in my mind, that's just sort of the way a 19th century composer would have dipped into his well-known scales, triads, and whatnot. Only I got to build my own. And in general, I would say this kind of attitude makes it perfectly coherent that composers of the 18th and 19th century could sort of compose big works off the cuff Whereas us guys these days have to work like hell and go through all this preliminary whatnot. Well, that's because the culture didn't deliver the pre-composition to us the way it did to those people. Okay, now let me pick off something that illustrates a point that what is it is I'm interested in getting when I use this stuff. When I was younger, I thought that, hey, the great payoff in really working at your pitch construction and so forth would come when you got a composition that just sort of reeked of this constructive principle and nothing else. And, you know, I don't mean nothing powerful, but I mean no dominant ninth resolving, you know, none of that. On its own principles. And I particularly expressed admiration for Webern, like beginning of the piano variations, where you really sort of follow the 1 through 12 and that it's all 12 and that it has little subgroups that are analogous, and then you turn around and you go backwards, right? You really hear that, and that's cute. And I tended to think, well, that's what we're after, as opposed to Schoenberg, who does this row construction and then proceeds to write chamber music as if it were by Brahms, except it's got all these funny intervals in place of, you know, serious harmony. And so I thought that was great in Webern. I still think it's great in Webern. But I began to realize that there's something that to me is a lot more to the point. I noticed that as I started doing my pitch constructions, the thing that would send me right into composition, where the pitches are talking to me and saying things, was precisely where the pitches would start producing somewhat bizarre things from the standpoint of the constructive principles that I was following. Things that, in short, that cropped up, but were not things which I was aiming to construct. I'll show you examples in a moment. But that began to change my attitude about just the whole nature of what we want in you know, an artwork when we absorb it as listener, consumer, whatever. And I can best illustrate that thing of what we want with an incredible performance that I refer to all the time by Zoltan Kocsis. It's a performance of all things, the art of the fugue on piano, on solo piano. Fabulous. Contrapunctus 11, which has got to be one of the Titanic works in the tradition. He plays with every note hit about the same. Like he plays it just so absolutely rigid and equal in every way. You don't hear subjects entering. You don't hear voices rather than chords or something like that. There's just this thing going by which has absolutely no humanoid inflections on it. It's just hitting you with these notes. And the sense I get is there is obviously deep structural action going on in there, but I couldn't say exactly what it was. And I value that. Like that indeed, I hate to say it, conforms to my sense of profundity, beyond, we haven't got there yet. And surely, we always value that in music. And the situation in Webern where we think we can really follow that structural thing going on, that's great. But I must say it doesn't correspond to what seems to me most important in music. For example, in a late Beethoven quartet, he's not exhibiting the system to you. It's working off the system all right, but he's looking for every screwy, twisted thing he can come up with, and still, with brute force, force a tonal interpretation on. And that to me is deep stuff. So, again, the pitiful things that we create now in place of the tonal system don't have anything in that degree, but just to give you an illustration of something that I was very pleased with. For the first time in my life, I think, in writing Ars Antiqua, I decided to put together connected pentachords, 5-note groups, into scales. I had never worked before with scales. So specifically what I did was take, there are 10 pieces, and I took all 10 of the pentachords, 5-note groups, which have independent inversions or cycle of fifths versions, or inverted cycle of fifths version, where, in other words, I picked the 10 pentachords which happen to have independent forms of each of those things. And I would string them together, like I make a scale out of each set of 4. And piece number 10 in here is the 10th set of 4. And now you can sort of imagine what happens. Let's see if I can, I'm going to try to read up, see if I can do it correctly. What I want to illustrate is how if I take one of these, like I see F, F sharp, G, A, C, if I take one of them, I see that's how it begins here. And now, next, right next to it, let's start on the next note. I do another one. What do I got here? I got C sharp, D, F. Go on up, A flat, B. No, that's what. Okay. Anyway, like that. Okay, I'm going to take the 4 independent forms so that you're getting different structures, although related and derived from one another, getting different structures for each 5-note packet as it goes up here. Okay, that sets up an interesting point. What about octaves? Because I'm still thinking octave equivalence.
Right.
Well, octaves, rather than being a sort of the fundamental interval at which we reduplicate everything, okay? Now, octaves are something which crop up oddly. Like as you go up there, I don't know, do we get to as over 2 octaves? Maybe sometimes. But anyway, let's say you get over 2 octaves by the time you put these things together and have your complete 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 scale. The octaves, like take this note down here, it may not have an octave correspondent in the next one. I mean, I don't know, is F sharp going to show up? And the next octave, I don't know. But then maybe it'll show up in the top octave. Maybe some notes it's not going to show up at all. So in other words, by doing this extremely rigorous thing, I have produced this rather random sounding situation for octave duplication. Now, that may not sound like any big deal, but it is a big deal. Just imagine now, as again one of these running patches, just imagine something that's going to go right up this scale and turn around and come back down. All right, but it's going to give you every available octave of that note. Well, that means that while something seems to go up, there were guys at Bell Labs that used to just gawk over this in principle. As you go right up that scale, including all the octave duplications, you'll get single note, followed by note and the 2-octave duplication of it, another note with just the 1-octave duplication, now a note with the both octaves of duplication, now a note with nothing, duplicate, etc. So now you set this running up and down, and you get something that, you know, on the one hand has this rising, falling sense, but at the same time is flickering all over the place. And when it comes to the turnaround note, I forget why. That's great. I've got something going where it can be whacked with percussion. Oh yeah, because the way I go up, first time when you go up, it's the outer notes that are such and such, and they catch it with percussion. And then the other time that you do a corresponding thing, those notes are right in the middle at the joint, so that instead of getting bop, you get okay, and everything is flickering. Well, hey, now I like that. That just by following what the pre-compositional rigor created in the way of sort of unexpected and randomly distributed things, I gave myself what I was really eager to get, which was something that's odd and interesting, but boy is it grounded. Okay, now you can say, this is some kind of faith I've got, that it's a good idea. And I mean, in music which just slops around, I miss it, that it doesn't. I think the idea of this rigorous foundation that one is not directly hearing, I think it's for real, and that it's important, and that all of us so regard it. At the other extreme, I have one piece that I like perfectly well, where I went the other way. I said, let's take something that is bizarre and random, and now let's start combing that for, you know, the chancy sense that crops up that we can make, and that's Greek nickel. I selected, you just got successive clumps of notes, and he said, right, get a clump of notes by flipping a coin 12 times, up or down, yes or no. Do we have a C? Flip the coin. Do we have a C sharp? Flip the coin. So he had to do this, you know, any number of times, a lot of work.
And it was a Greek nickel.
And it was a Greek nickel, that's the thing. Yeah, I stole it from my oldest daughter. So yeah, I proceeded to accept the successive clumps. There might be 3 notes, followed by 10 notes, followed by where, and who knows what internal resemblances or duplications, or you find out, and that's what you start picking on. But not to make bizarre, that's bizarre enough. You do it to somehow make something grow sensibly, which is what I did. And I mean, I liked the piece just fine. I remember it was played once up at Wesleyan, and some of the far out random boys up there really objected to this piece because they said I didn't really follow the random idea. And you know, I didn't stay the course. That's right. I chickened, and I assured them that's right. I certainly did not. It's just, but a funny idea that this was sort of Wesleyan is a place where John Cage left a huge footprint, and these guys were just all in that. And so, in the John Cage tradition, you don't give a shit about what kind of thing you're getting. You precisely what you're interested in is your procedure, and you want to make sure that your procedure is, you tell me. Okay, so yeah, I did want to sort of explain that, that I guess you'd have to say aesthetic shift that I've been subject to, where I really am sensing the value of music having this up there. That's what we enlist in, but it's having stuff in it that we can't quite dope out, but that is what's making it hang together. And therein, inevitably, lies the sense of this is profound. Right. And I like that. I like that.
Kind of depth resonance.
Yeah, absolutely. And now I relate our resonance of the pitches after a tonal piece. I relate that to that. That's a perfectly good example of what's being created that is not what you're following. You're following everything that has to do with creating that. But what that creates, that's what's left over. It's a funny kind of totality with a vivid magnetism is the best, right? Varying across the field. Hey, and it's in around there. See, we're now getting into territory where I'm happy with the way I've been writing about music, because it seems to me that when I then start spewing out my alleged scenarios for pieces of music, somehow I am trying to capture not the piece, it's not analysis, but what's back there. And if you want, you know, the deep leftover is more what I'm ready. And of course, another thing, that always strikes me, back to about. Mm-hmm. At various times in my life, I've held forth about. Benji. 1 second now. There are a few things that people ask that I maybe could just directly speak of. For instance, Brad Bassler asked me something which I think I wrestled with a little bit. I don't know how much I can say, but he wanted to know about how things seem different to me when I'm on a large scale or a small scale. And Brad is the author of that terrific poem that was printed in Open Space. It's, I don't know, 40 pages long, and its title is A Rhetoric of Dislocations. Dislocations, and he attributes it to my Gap 6 for piano, which I dearly love, and wants to know about my attitude towards scale. And he produces a quote from Morty Feldman, where Morty Feldman said that when he got onto his huge 6-hour scale, composition just became something altogether different. And now I can get some traction out of the point that, as I expressed in my John Cage review, I do indeed have a particular way that I latch on to Feldman's Sixth Quartet. And that is that composition for him has now become a process whereby we put together the sound that we're trying to get at right now, the way a performer or a composer might sit and test the damn thing this way, that way, until finally something coalesces and we've got it, and we proceed to the next that we now try from scratch. I mean, you know, trying, now this bowing doesn't work, or that's the wrong strength for the bed. So that composing has become the process of providing the origins of something in our grappling after it. I think I would say that in Gap 7, which is my largest scale work, running an hour and 45 minutes, I think I would say it's maybe different from my other pieces, but it's not doing what Morton Feldman is doing. Let me say what it's doing and you see what you think. Gap 7 takes one of my tetrachord packages on the 4 cycles, and like you can get an idea, and it takes some equivalents of them. If you look right at the end of the score, the sequence of tetrachords that I'm talking about you can see on the last 2 pages, 36, 37, minus the diminished seventh in the top stave and the diminished sevenths and the bottom staves over here. This stuff on these 2 pages is the bases of the piece as a chord progression. So that first chord you see there is an all-interval tetrachord, which means that if you look at the chord C, E, G flat, D flat, you've got each interval once each. You've got C, D flat, you've got E, G flat, major second. For a minor third, you've got, what do we got? D flat, E. For a major third, you got the C. For a perfect interval, you've got the G flat, D flat. And for a tritone, you've got C, G flat. And that's it. You got each interval once each. And this to me was, you know, a very neat kind of thing, as you'll see in a moment. What we've got then in this progression is like inversion, cycle of fifths equivalent, inversion of that, and the registration of them, or first place, the transpositions are selected in order to get a situation in which there are 2 common tones between this chord and this chord. So once again, you see, even in the innards here, I'm hanging on to this thing of pitches recoloring other pitches. I mean, the same, there are going to be 2 common tones here, 2 common tones here, and 2 common tones around the corner. Let's see, what do we got here? All right. So I don't have to spell out exactly how all of this is generated, but what it does, a way of looking at it, let's say, I can look at that chord as having distributed those intervals in that particular way. So I've got, let's see, I've got a hunch here, I don't know. In other words, the C, D flat, the minor second is in that registration. The major second is in this E, G flat registration. That will be quite different. Like, let's say we'll go on to a place over here and C and D flat will not be in the same relation to one another. As we don't, let's say you can get the idea. I can't even take it on. But in the course of the piece, we do things like go right through one iteration of that bunch of chords, that chord progression, taking only the minor second intervals. However, and they'll go like this. Then the major second intervals, and they'll go some other way. So that in a sense you can say that I'm going about step by step, interval by interval, building up this thing that you have on the end as a chord progression. And that's all true, but it certainly is a very different sense of, building up from the Morty Feldman thing. Very different kind of sense. But the most challenging thing that I do, and I do a lot of it, is listening to the CDs of my own music. That's hard because I find that it's with luck and a long time later that I really managed to clear my head out and let this thing get in on its own, rather than in terms of what I was, wrestling with and so forth. I told you that place where I'm still counting the rests. Right. That's sort of typical. Yeah. I know there's a place in Ars Antiqua where I worked and I couldn't satisfy myself that I was getting just the right rhythmic bounce to hear. Well, I'll never satisfy myself because the piece is shaped around that in my head. It's how that goes is what the piece was all about. Well, this is ridiculous. Anybody listening with a clear head would probably say, well, it doesn't even matter. Yeah, I guess if it came a 16th note earlier or lasted a 16th note longer, I might like that too. But But above all, that place in the piece ain't diddly shit. That's not that's just some little thing that I was trying to horse with and just couldn't get to come out right. But for the rest, I find that listening to my own music gives me an opportunity to catch up with it, to clear my head out and take it in on its own. And by and large, I tend to think, okay, that's, I'm pleased to have done that. And the stuff always feels to me very carefully done. And I like that. It seems like whatever I was up to, and mostly, obviously, it's not what I would be up to right now, but when I was up to it, I was really very conscientious and clear with what I came out with. Hey, and Scott, bring up now some of you had a couple of great questions, or at least...
Well, some of them you've covered. We talked a little bit about, because I was asking, is there anything in music theory as a field for you? And
right.
I do also remember remarking that some might characterize you as possessing a certain cussedness.
I remember that, yes.
And I just wanted to...
Well, certainly. Certainly I have eliminated any thought like that with my performance today. Sure. Heavens.
Yeah.
Just cuddly old Jim.
That's
Nothing
right.
cussed there. Though somebody else asked, which I relate to your question, whether I regarded my music as, in any sense, Midwestern. And I think those two are related.
Uh-huh.
I think Midwestern cussed, kind of close. Like I was thinking, we haven't talked much about, you had another question, a good one, about how my approach to writing words
Oh, yeah.
seems to be as extravagant as I can make it, whereas my approach to writing, and you quote particularly from Gap 7,
Right, the motto.
yeah, it has this motto, nothing fancy, nothing free,
And I
and
said,
inquiry.
that definitely doesn't characterize your writing.
No, like when I write words, it seems to be quite the opposite, that just all over the place. Yeah, and now I was thinking a moment ago, yeah, what is there about that? You know, maybe it does boil down to a simple point. It's, yeah, why would that be? With words, I've after all been using them in this culture for 80 plus years. And I mean, I feel like I know my words and I know this culture.
Plus, the pre-composition's been done for you.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Yeah. I don't have to work so hard to get myself into position to say some little thing. So yeah, that probably is an important cultural consideration there. Oh, hey, Jesus. Oh, I'm not thinking of that. Those two, that's fine. But hey, we were going to make the whole scene on Ben's question, what do I mean by my music?
Yeah.
Oh, we gotta hack away at that.
We in fact were, that question just sat there as such a fundamental question, even a sort of meta question or something, that we did come back and forth with it. We at some point put it at the beginning.
Yeah, because it covers everything. Hey, now one thing, the question also must be read as Ben's question to me, because we go back a ways, and not only do I know that question, any time before last year sort of would have seemed like a question which didn't really understand the meanings of words and knew nothing about all the philosophical hang-ups about meaning and stuff like that. But Ben is full of that stuff. Ben has read analytic philosophy, and so I already got that up to Giggy. And I know perfectly well that 50 or 40 years ago, the question, what do you mean by your music, would have first of all got itself parsed as, what do you mean by your music, in quotes, and you now must, in response, state, what objects in the real world do you cover with the term your music. That's not what this means, as if you happen to read Ben's most recent article, which has the marvelous punchline, Milton changed the subject. You can't, John Arendt, this is where we are. This is what Milton meant by his music. And so now I'm being asked, well, what do I mean by my music? And now Ben, knowing me all too well, knows that my first response is, not a damn thing. My individual pieces, you might say, mean something in the sense that my scenarios, let's say, pull something out of a piece of music, and okay, well, we've discussed that more intelligently than that, but yeah, you know, that might be a candidate for meaning, but that's the meaning of that piece. That doesn't really deal with the question, what do I mean by that? Now, I got another hang up in there. I have so many times heard idiot composers speak with a snotty look on their face of my music. And it turns me off because in some funny way, I guess, it's just occurring to me, and this answers the question, what I mean by my music is something like I'm putting this out there so that it no longer is mine. It now is there, and it's more like, hello, and here I am. It's more like that. I don't mean something by it. I am that. That's okay. That goes a little ways. But equally, I want to emphasize that I sense a problem there, that I have more notion of what a piece means, and if you'll allow my scenario as what it means, than I have of what my whole enterprise means, which is, I think, what Ben is asking. There's also an aspect to it that by my music, for instance, do I include my writing? That is my, my words stuff? Do I include that as my music? Well, I probably would, but that, on the other hand, that doesn't seem right. Does anybody mean that? I don't know. So yeah, I'm thinking that given the specificity with which Ben's article, first of all, spells out the territory in which he's going to say Milton changed the subject, I have to notice that I think I would like to undo that to an extent, because I think it's the case that I'd like to change the subject back, but then I want to proceed from there. I don't want to just leave it where it is. And I'm thinking that a lot of the things that I have said about Milton's music today they'll have to serve as what I mean by I would like to maybe retrieve the subject or change the subject back. And then, I've surely said a lot which might indicate, how I would change it. Now, is that what I mean? I don't know. I think I come right back to, I don't know what the hell I mean by my music. I think, hello, here I am.